Hello, my name is host Eric. I am the host of Talking with Famous People, and I thought I would talk this evening a little bit about drugs, addiction, and drugs, addiction, and restraint, self-discipline, indulgence, impulsiveness, all those things that go together to comprise addiction. So, Lorenz and Bo are both NTPs. I think that, in fact, NTPs are very prone to addiction. And the reason, especially ENTPs, but INTPs as well can go there. I think it's going to be related specifically to weakness in SI. I think somebody with SI in the third, fourth, or seventh slot is going to be susceptible to addiction. This is just a hypothesis, but I bet it's the case. I was thinking about it more today because I did my normal meow 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 video, which and then I was like, Eric, can you stop doing that? But I'm kind of conflicted about it. Sometimes I want to meow meow meow, and sometimes I don't. And then sometimes I feel bad about it. I don't know what to think about that shit. Anyhow, regarding addiction, right? I'm not going to get sidetracked into musing mid-video. Why are the NTPs particularly prone to addiction? Well, the reason I think SI ties into addiction I think that the reason SI ties into addiction is because of a couple of reasons. One, to have good SI is to have a good sense of oneself as an entity and an identity over time. That they understand themselves as a compilation of their previous experiences, choices, life acts, etc. I think people with any in the dominant slot, like ENTPs, or in the tool function, like INTPs, they seek a lot of change, in part because, in some ways, and I mean, in part because there's an assumption on the part of an NTP that your choices don't count. You can always make an action, at least for an ENTP for sure, and then change your mind and go and do something different later. That there's that kind of assumption, or that you somehow have multiple lives to try everything out, and then as you get older and you realize, oh, I have to make my choices count. Things change a little bit, but it's very easy for an NEDOM, ENFP, or ENTP to ignore what you decided to do before, and to ignore what makes sense looking forward, and to choose instead to indulge in the thing you want to do right now. So functionally, that's a description of the behavior of an addict doing addict stuff, Now, I want to answer a couple of things that they're said in chat here. Lauren's got his mic on, so he could just say it out loud, but I will read his comment anyway. So these guys are talking about basically pro-drug messages. Say, like how more thoughtful I get on drugs. I mean, that graph of a stone. And INTPs are really susceptible to addiction. You're not an INTP, Bo. You're an ENTP. Yeah, well, the thing about it is, ENTPs are very prone to it because we are drawn to the magic aspect of it. You can change who you are. Well, SE has to do something with addiction, depending. Like the reason ENFPs are oh no, that's not right. The reason that well, okay, I mean it's a perceiving thing, right? So it's like if you have a dominant extroverted perceiver, that type is more prone to addiction. SE DOMs, NE DOMs. Those are the most prone. Your second most prone would be SE in the second function and NE in the second function. Those are the things that make you want to do drugs and stuff. And the reason is because we don't understand ourselves naturally very well as beings in time. And so we aren't trying to sustain an image of ourselves over time that's consistent. And we don't worry about the fact that oh, the fact that I did drugs yesterday doesn't mean anything about myself today. Is an assumption of the extroverted intuitor and the extroverted sensor that they need to kind of get around, because it's built on the assumption that you have infinite hours, and that those hours that are spent doing that are not retrievable. And of course, the question of addiction is going to depend very much on the drug in question. So, are you doing a drug on which you can concurrently do other kind of drugs? If that's the case, I mean, if you're doing a drug, I'm sorry, you're doing a drug on which you can concurrently do other kinds of things, does it prevent you from doing useful stuff? To me, that's the really important question, because with alcohol was a drug that required me to be less effective, to have judgment problems, to have a lot of emotional issues or self-loathing issues, stuff like that. Whereas marijuana I found to be not really a drug per se, but for me, in my particular situation, I'm not advocating its usage for people who don't currently use it. I don't think it's a good idea to start doing things that you already haven't started doing. Because if you are addiction prone, the best choice you can make is to avoid substances entirely, or you'll probably have some sort of addiction problem with it. However, I mean, I see my own daughter much more successfully than me deal with a relationship with substances, and I think it's probably because she's watched me throughout her childhood having difficulties with substances, and that kind of modeling will cause her to take more seriously the issue than I did, where it was modeled as normal and acceptable in my house. I like to store more impressions I have of my experience on drugs, because if I feel the expression of my thoughts, I have more dopamine in my system, and when I remember it, and I keep it in my memory, it's something closer to FE. Okay, well, interesting. I can tell you as... Okay, but listen, Bo. I normally don't dispute somebody on their own type. And I normally don't conclude someone's an ENTP very firmly. But first of all, it's well established that ENTPs are going to first and persistently say, I'm a TI dom. I do all my work and my thinking. Right? Look at the amount of fucking words you've already written in the chat, dude. If you think you're an INTP, You think wrong, my friend. You are straight up ENTP. I mean, watch those videos where you and me are throwing down. You're totally an ENTP. I mean, you do the shifty ground thing that INTPs do, but you do it the ENTP way. And I mean, you just are. You're so blah. It's not a matter of I think you're extroverted, like whether or not you get energized by other people or something. It's a matter of which is dominant. NE is obviously dominant in you, in my opinion. The reason you think you're TI is because you're doing all your NE work in the tool TI. That's my perspective. But I mean, you can certainly choose to ignore me and believe what you wish. I feel in control of my drug use, just microdose LSD or psilocybin, no need for much more. Well, I don't think you do, actually, Bo. I think you're definitely an ENTP. But that's my opinion. Like I said, you can disagree with me if you want. Obviously, I'm not trying to stop anybody from disagreeing with me. So I know Lorenz is definitely an INTP, and you'll note that. How much have you said, Lorenz? Not a whole hell of a lot. So I know that Lorenz also indicated some pro-drug sentiments in the past. And the point is, ENTPs and INTPs are very similar in a lot of different ways. It's easy for a person to think, perhaps, for one vector or another, like, oh, well, I know I must be a TI dom, so therefore I must be an INTP because I have all the other qualities of an INTP. It's a normal sort of conclusion to draw, a perfectly reasonable and understandable conclusion to draw. But it's because they're similar that it's possible to make the mistake. At the end of the day, the INTP is a cautious creature and takes few risks in general. I would say for the INTP, it's less of a risk for addiction, but it's still a risk. And just because, Bo, you're confident that it's working for you, it may be. And I think that it's important to be willing to say, no, this process is working for me. And you'll probably face a lot of, in general, pushback towards the notion that it might be okay to be doing that. I would say that it might be okay to be doing that. And it's okay for it to have been okay to be doing that and to be transitioned out of that process as well. Just because something may not be okay forever for you doesn't mean it has to always have been not okay. So those are just my little words of old man. I'm the old man who sits on his porch and gives advice, unsolicited advice to passers-by. But, I mean, the topic here is addiction, and I do understand that there's a period of one's life, especially for NTPs, where addiction is both attractive and it's very easy to come up with plenty of justifications for an NTP as to why this is a good idea right now. It's something that we do particularly well. If we want to do the drug, we can come up with a pretty good reason to do it, I'm sure. Or we'll just do it without thinking about it. We'll choose not to think about having any reasons. So at first we come up with reasons. We can sort of lie to ourselves. We stop lying to ourselves and we go, okay, well, Eric, you're doing it because you're a drug addict. That's why. And then we go, okay, that's good enough. That's true. I am a drug addict. Oh my goodness. That's such a good reason to do drugs. It's not really a good reason to do drugs unless you are specifically managing it, I think. And ultimately, for me, that's the issue of drug addiction. I just like drugs, lol, says Lawrence. Well, I know. I mean, we all like drugs, right? But the point is, even though we all like drugs, perhaps, and NTPs tend to do that, the point of this addiction video is that it may not be the best idea for us to indulge some of those natural proclivities, because we should be attentive to the fact that those kind of things can get out of hand without ever really being aware of it. We assume we have the intelligence and willpower and knowledge to control our own behavior, but we don't necessarily. So, in my opinion, I guess that's the message I would leave for any younger NTPs, especially ENTPs, is watch out. Watch out with the drugs and alcohol for sure. It's easy to find yourself in a bad place and spend time going, I guess, just go S, you go SISE. The SE makes your body feel good. And it's not something it takes a long time for you to even understand that you're attracted to that. And then your SI feels shame for whatever you did last night and stuff. So, I would say watch out for particularly alcohol, because alcohol impairs one's judgment about consuming more alcohol. I know that I always had a rule and successfully followed it. No needles, no injecting anything. So I never did, and I would strongly recommend you follow that rule as well. I also recommend the following rule: no PCP. And that's one to grow on. Don't do PCP, kids. Don't shoot anything. Prioritize drugs other than alcohol. And if you follow those rules, you got a better shot than if you don't. Thanks for watching Talking with Famous People.